For a closer look at the consequences then, or what comes next, we'll cross now to our Europe Affairs editor, Armen Georgian. Hi there, Armen. So what's your take on these results then?
Well, I'd like to look at the European trend, Aaron. We've seen a shift towards right-wing parties in Europe. We've seen that in Italy, in Greece, in Finland, in Bulgaria, and now in Spain as well, with the Conservative Party winning the biggest number of seats. But what this Spanish result also shows on a sort of European level is the fragmentation of the political scene. So you've got, over the years, we've seen increasing competition both on the right of the spectrum and on the left of the spectrum between different parties. So in Spain, the socialists and the conservatives, they used to get a combined share of the vote of about 85%. That has shrunk. So now if you look at these results together, if you take them together, they got about 72, 73% of the vote. So when you look at it like that, you can see that the space has opened up for other parties. And we've seen the same story in other countries. You know, in Germany, the SPD and the CDU, they don't win the sort of share of the vote that they used to. In France, we've seen marked decline in the influence of the socialists and the conservatives just in the last few years in France. But when we talk about European trends, I think we also have to take into account the specific political culture and history and traditions of the individual countries. So whereas in Finland, for example, the far right actually entered the coalition, it's part of a four-way coalition. In Spain, you have a sort of very heavy legacy of the Civil War and the Franco regime, which very much played into this election campaign. And we saw that the opponents of Vox, the far-right party, those opponents really played on Vox's quite open admiration of the former Franco regime, and perhaps that's one of the things that gave voters pause for thought in the end when they actually went to the ballot box. Certainly Vox, though it did very well in the regional elections, it didn't make the big gains that some were predicting in this national parliamentary election.
Spain's EU presidency, Armen, is of course only a few weeks old. So what impact do you think this still inconclusive result, it must be said, will have on Spanish leadership in Europe?
Well, Spain's presidency began on the 1st of July. It ends on the 31st of December. Spanish officials that I've spoken to, they insisted that in no way did this election campaign distract from the preparations for Spain's EU presidency. They were insisting that Spain was extremely well prepared. And it's possible that if this deadlock continues in Spain now, coming out of this election, it's possible that Pedro Sanchez would still be prime minister for much of this EU presidency, which, as I said, goes on until the end of the year. We'll have to see what happens in the next few weeks, obviously. But, you know, one scenario that's been mooted is perhaps that the Spaniards will be asked to vote again if the deadlock isn't broken, in which case presumably much of the Spain's EU presidency will have passed by anyway. We'll have to see what happens, but it's also true that if the Conservative Party came to power and there was still some decent time left on the Spanish EU presidency, then you would definitely get a different emphasis in Spain's EU presidency. We're not talking about a completely radical change, but it would be different from the socialists of Pedro Sanchez when it comes to things like migration, borders, and the Green New Deal.
Armen Georgian, thank you very much.
Thank you.